of the Targaryen dynasty. He was the Lord of Dragonstone, one of a succession after the Targaryens fled Valyria and settled on Dragonstone in advance of the Doom. A number of them came and went. Mostly their eyes still gazed east toward Essos, but as the years passed and son succeeded father and brother succeeded brother, they began to take more interest in the affairs of Westeros. And Aegon finally decided to take over Westeros and unify the 7 kingdoms that existed at the time under a single rule. There is a lot of speculation that, in some sense, he saw what was coming 300 years later and wanted to unify the 7 kingdoms to be better prepared for the threat that he eventually saw coming from the north, the threat that we're dealing with in A Song of Ice and Fire.
Hi there. I've come across leak info for House of the Dragon the past few weeks, and I'd like to share it with you because I've reached a point where I think it's reasonably credible that it could be real. I can't confirm any of this. I'm not saying, oh, of course this is exciting. I'm not trying to make up stuff just for the sake of being exciting, but because I think this is what they'll actually do, or at least it sounds like a plausible leak. That House of the Dragon is one of the least magic-filled prequel eras that there are, if you think about it. Other than the fact that there's dragons, of course, but, you know, the whole Game of Thrones TV show thing that they said they actively took out a lot of the magic stuff from the books. That whole infamous Austin Film Fest panel where they said, oh, we took out magic stuff because we wanted it to appeal to moms and football players, and that whole thing, that was a whole meme. But we're not getting a lot of the magical side of things in a lot of the prequels, because the White Walkers aren't returning. It's not as much of the epic scale thing. There are some things scattered about. I mean, like there's a potential Dunk and Egg prequel, which they are considering right now. They're actually ordered a pilot script. And, like Lord Bloodraven is allegedly a magic user. That Targaryen conquest would also be relatively little magic, depending on whether they show the Doom of Valyria in it or not, as a prologue. But like they suspect that Visenya dabbled in magic, that one of Maegor's wives dabbled in magic. She was a torturer. But other than that, there's later a character in House of the Dragon called Alice Rivers, who's implied to be either a Red Priestess or trained by one, that she's Melisandre-like. She's this witch and she does things. The overall story doesn't really relate to that. Even Alice herself, she's like a side character. It's not part of the main story for most of it. Other than that, there are certain magical things that exist, like they imply that Valyrian steel was made with magic, that's why it's so sharp, but other than that, it isn't particular. Like Ned Stark's sword ice was in the first episode of Game of Thrones, and these are people who don't believe in magic, because they haven't seen it in centuries. But Valyrian steel is made with magic, but it's a known quantity. That the rumor we've heard is that relative to the source material, if you read it in Fire and Blood, it doesn't seem that magical. They're putting a lot of magic stuff into House of the Dragon in the form of prophecies. That it is a thing in the books that Targaryens have prophetic dreams. They call them dragon dreams because there's often dragons in them, but even when they're not, they have a lot of prophetic dreams. Daenerys has a lot of these. Characters in other time periods, Egg's older brother has dragon dreams in the first Dunk and Egg prequel novella, and they show signs of the future, the past, all that. So there are rumors I've seen that there's more than one of these, that multiple Targaryen characters in the show will be having prophetic dreams. And they're actually relative to, whereas Game of Thrones had a lot of magic and they chose to throw it out, this was something with relatively little magic in the source material, and they increased it as much as possible, but still within that framework, because, it's an outline. They said, well, actually, a lot of these characters have prophetic dreams. It's a trait of the Targaryen bloodline. And that these will tie in House of the Dragon to Game of Thrones because of prophecies about the return of the White Walkers. And having heard all of these leaks, and it was from multiple sources, that's why I think it's going to happen, I honestly think this was a good idea, the way they handled it, because it's a lot of people now are turned off on the White Walkers. I am still excited for the book White Walkers, which were handled well. The TV show made them generic villains, then nerfed them. Bluntly, there is no effing Night King in the books. Benioff and Weiss invented him because they wanted a generic big bad evil overlord. So all this hype about, well, who will kill the Night King? I don't think there is a Night King in the books. Martin implied, I actually asked Martin directly once in a Q&A, like, is this the Night's King, which is a different character in the books? And he said, there is no equivalent to this in the books, in such a way that it was vague, but I'm pretty sure they made that up. That Benioff and Weiss are con men who just wanted to run off to make Star Wars movies and were not concerned with this. And all of that blind hype about, oh, the White Walkers, the White Walkers. The book White Walkers are still cool to me. They're interesting. They're like evil spirits and stuff. Versus, I keep having to explain to people even now, there is no Night King in the books if you think it was a bad character who never talks. That's silly. On a certain level, House of the Dragon would need to acknowledge that the White Walkers exist, because if they ever mention, like the Night's Watch and the Wall, which won't come into the story that much, but if they ever send someone to the Wall, they have to go, well, why does the Night's Watch exist? Well, because we thought the White Walkers might come back. Only on the vaguest level. This isn't really heavily tying it in, but they'll name drop, well, there's a prophecy that one day the White Walkers might come back. Like, on the broadest of terms, and it didn't really sound like it affected the show that much, but just enough to tie it into Game of Thrones. Or, I hope we get a remake eventually, but like our Snyder Cut, but with new people. Like, it isn't just Season 8, it's ever since Martin told them the outline for future books in the middle of Season 4, they just burned through material. They didn't want to make his vision of this. They weren't trying to. It has nothing to do with needs of condensation. They were just doing this to further their own careers. And the whole White Walker Night King hype turned into such a cult of fan speculation when you could just stand back and say, this has no basis in the books, I think they're making it up. And then you turn around and blame the books for some crappy thing the TV show did. That makes as much sense as blaming the books for how bad Season 5 Dorne was written, when, it contradicts published books. That makes no sense. Well, let me get to the point here. Sorry about that preamble. I'm 7 minutes into this. Very specifically, we have multiple reports that in Episode 1, King Viserys and his brother Daemon, played by Matt Smith, are going to be discussing the doom of Valyria. And that this is what Daemon's line in the first trailer, actually it was the only line in the teaser trailer, dreams didn't make us kings, dragons did. That's another reason why I think this leak was real. It's more than one leak, they tie together. That basically, Viserys is Rhaenyra's father, and her mother, his wife, Queen Aemma Arryn, is heavily pregnant, and she dies in childbirth in the first episode. And her baby son doesn't live a day. He lives a matter of hours and then dies. So, of course, the plot is Viserys eventually remarries and tries to produce a male heir with his second wife, and then he does. And then there's a succession conflict of, well, doesn't a son come ahead of a daughter? And all this scheming between the different factions. But at the end of within the first episode, Viserys is, he's a decent, honorable man. He's in shock and he has a good relationship with his wife, and he'll be lamenting in the Red Keep to Daemon, my beloved, kind, and good wife died in childbirth. My innocent newborn son died in a matter of hours. I am grief-stricken. How could the gods allow such pain to happen? Why is there evil in the world whenever someone good and innocent suddenly dies? Why is there random evil in the world to the innocent? And how could all of this pain I'm feeling now, how could all of this pain inflicted on the innocent be part of the gods' plan? And he's just wondering aloud because he's in shock. And the idea is Daemon will, scoff at him. Either the gods aren't real, or they're real, but don't care about our suffering. I don't really care. It doesn't matter. But the idea is, we've heard descriptions, which I think are probably accurate because they're not just dialogue, they're tangible. I mean, we would see these in promotional photos when they start showing us the new set designs. That the Red Keep is filled with artwork of Valyria and the history of the Targaryens. We've seen some of that in the teaser. We saw, if you zoom in, like the frescoes and carvings on the columns in the throne room appear to be like Trajan's column depicting historical events. Well, we've heard of like really elaborate tapestry props showing things from history, from the books. And rumors of that there's even like a Viserys has like a model of the capital city of Valyria before the Doom, before the fall. But it's something like he's either looking at a model of Valyria or a painting of Valyria, a big, like, 10-foot wide tapestry or something. He's lamenting all of this while he happens to be standing in front of, like, a tapestry or a model of Valyria. And Daemon says, oh, the gods aren't real or they don't care. And then you see the gears turning in Viserys' head. And he's looking at the thing about the Doom, and he'll give an info dump about the origin of the Targaryens, that he'll go, well, we were dragon lords in Valyria, and then Lord Aenar Targaryen's daughter, Daenerys the Dreamer, had these prophetic visions in her dreams. She had these prophetic dreams that Valyria was going to be destroyed. So a dozen years before the Doom happened, they relocated their entire family to this distant overseas outpost, Dragonstone, off the coast of Westeros, took their dragons with them. A dozen years later, Valyria was completely destroyed in a volcanic explosion that, like, took out the entire landmass. It was a world-changing event. And this is a great way to fit in the full explanation of the origin of the Targaryens and who Daenerys the Dreamer was, and they will mention her by name, that we briefly saw Valyria when, like, Tyrion went through it in Game of Thrones Season 5. They mentioned there was a volcanic explosion, but they never explained in live action who Daenerys the Dreamer was and how the Targaryens got away. Like, they show that more in the animated stuff, which was actually pretty good. But it'll clearly, and to a casual audience who didn't read the books, explain the story of how the Targaryens survived the Doom of Valyria. That Daenerys Targaryen, daughter of that lord, and she eventually, with her brother, came to rule Dragonstone, she had prophetic dreams. So that you see the gears turning in Viserys' head, and he goes, well, you say the gods don't care or aren't real, but Daenerys the Dreamer was sent prophetic dreams, apparently by the gods. So even though I'm all this pain and grief and anguish now, and I'm wondering, can this be part of the gods' plan? And you say they don't exist. The gods must have a plan for us, for the world. Even if we don't fully comprehend it, I don't think they're not real. They must be real and have some interest in human affairs. They're not, if you say they're either not real, they don't care. They're not indifferent to human events. They sent dreams to Daenerys to save House Targaryen, to save our family. And there's all these other legends that they must exist. And Daemon scoffs again and goes, or Daenerys just had a really bad dream and it's a coincidence that her father believed her and relocated and she got lucky. And Martin himself has said this, some people go, she's the lucky one that had a bad dream that turned out to be true. You forget about all the dreams about destruction and the end of the world that don't turn out to be true. They were just a bad dream. People forget about them. So Daemon will bring up, maybe it was just a really big coincidence that she had a bad dream that turned out to match reality, and he scoffs at it and goes away. So it's interesting that they'll explain, I'm pretty sure this is real from all the prop description, in the first episode, what was the Doom of Valyria, and prominently bringing up prophecy, and prophecy, magic, in that sense. Now, most of the magic in this will be in the form of prophecy, not like, throwing fireballs and stuff. Well, the dragons do that, but you know what I mean, not Melisandre type stuff, just prophetic dreams that characters have. This is where the inventions start happening that really we didn't know about in the books, but it's an outline, and you wonder, maybe this was in George R. R. Martin's head, because they are consulting with him, and it matches well enough. After Viserys decides to officially name Rhaenyra the royal heir, there's a scene where he first informs her of this in private, by bringing her down to the preserved skull of Balerion. Balerion, the dragon of Aegon the Conqueror, who forged the Iron Throne. I mean, literally, Balerion's flames were used to melt down the swords. On top of that, Viserys personally rode Balerion the last few years of his life when he was very old and couldn't fly that much, but the symbolism of, I'm taking you in front of the dragon that forged the Iron Throne to tell you you are now the heir to the Iron Throne. But Viserys then goes on to explain that there's a secret prophecy passed down to each new heir to the throne. Aegon the Conqueror was motivated to invade and unite the Seven Kingdoms in the first place because he had a prophetic dream that the White Walkers would return someday. And so he had to conquer and unite the Seven Kingdoms, make a united front to strengthen the realms of men into a united front against the eventual return of the White Walkers. That's why the conquest happened. Why are they then passing it down from father to son? That I said before that lots of Targaryens have prophetic dreams. It's not that this is a recurring dream that each king had. It happened one time. It happened just to Aegon the Conqueror. He's the only one who experienced it. But he passed it down verbally. That for the past 100 years, it's been verbally passed down from father to son in the Targaryen dynasty, but kept as a secret. Why would you preserve this? Why not just let it be a historical artifact? Is it you're worried people won't believe you, or what? It's sort of like this secret Great Commission that Aegon left behind for any monarch who would follow him on the throne. That the real reason we're here isn't for glory or power, it's we have united Westeros with fire and blood to eventually fight off the White Walkers. And part of that, the big central message he gave to all future kings, is never partition Westeros. Never let the kingdoms break up again. And I use the word partition with the full historical connotations of that term, in the sense of the partitioning of India and Pakistan, or the partitioning of Ireland and Northern Ireland. That Aegon the Conqueror left behind this message to pass down just to the next heir, saying, never partition Westeros, no matter what civil wars happen, you have to unite it against the White Walkers coming back eventually. So, Viserys tells this to Rhaenyra, and the idea is that this will guide some of her future actions. That there were points in the books where it was suggested maybe we should partition Westeros between you and Alicent. That it came up, might as well give spoilers here, that after Rhaenyra manages to take King's Landing, it's a great victory, but her forces have kind of stalled. That she manages to defeat the Crown Lands armies of Criston Cole, and the Lannister army is destroyed, but she's running out of money now. She managed to take King's Landing, but then her offensive stalls. The Hightower army is coming with Daeron the Daring at full strength. The Stormlands haven't even been blooded yet. That the Greens have suffered a major defeat with losing King's Landing, but it would take years to grind down their core territories, and they absconded with most of the old royal treasury. They've lost, the Lannister army, they've taken serious losses, but they can hire new men. They have a lot of the royal treasury back in Old Town. They can keep going. That Casterly Rock, Storm's End, Old Town remain unconquered. So Alicent, who has been captured, but, still cognizant of everything, pleads with Rhaenyra, look, most of your followers are north of the Blackwater, most of mine are south of it. Or was it the Trident? But if you look at a map, more or less it's the north versus the south of Westeros. She says, through the Riverlands, can't we just divide the realm into a northern kingdom that you rule and a southern kingdom that my children rule? And yeah, obviously I'm talking in my own interest, but Alicent urges her, look at the reality on the ground. You have run out of money. Your armies have been badly bloodied, and they've won, but you're losing men. You do not have the strength to mount an offensive against the Reach, against Old Town. Even another one of your children might die. Even if you manage to conquer us, is it worth losing even one more of your children? That it will be a bloody, bloody conflict to grind us down on a scale of years. Can't we just partition Westeros? Which is actually a pretty rational thing to admit. We will admit defeat if you partition it. And Rhaenyra refuses. Now, obviously, the Maester writing the in-universe history book in Fire and Blood, Gyldayn, thought it was because Rhaenyra was vengeful and capricious. What if there's like a secret history that really, no, she feels that she can never agree to a negotiated peace dividing up the realm in this civil war, that it has to be all or nothing. And that lines up a lot with her actions in the books, more than just, well, she's vindictive, but that that is a serious question that comes up in time of civil war. Maybe we should just partition the realm, and will be what drives Rhaenyra not to do that. And this lines up very well. I mean, there was a similar prophecy about the Targaryens and the prince that was promised in the books, that generations later, in the time of Daenerys' grandfather, actually, that Daenerys' father was Aerys the Mad King. Her mother was Aerys' sister wife, Rhaella. Their father, her grandfather, was Jaehaerys II, who forced Aerys and Rhaella into an arranged marriage against their wills. They didn't like each other. And it's said, just briefly, because this will probably come out in like the final Duncan Egg story or something, that there's a rumor that Jaehaerys forced his children to marry even though they hated each other, because a woods witch told him a prophecy that one day the prince that was promised, who would save Westeros from the White Walkers, would be born from their specific union, from the bloodline of Aerys and his sister wife Rhaella. So in the books, there already is some sort of connection between the Targaryens and prophecies about the return of the White Walkers. This fits pretty well in there. But what really convinced me was when I looked back and remembered that clip that I ran at the beginning of this video of George R.R. Martin himself in a series of promo videos for the release of Fire and Blood back in late 2018, where he's saying, just out of the blue, that this was not mentioned in the books at all, Martin going, some speculate Aegon got a sense of the threat of the White Walkers and wanted to unite Westeros against their eventual return. This did catch a lot of our attention at the time, 4 years ago. We had other big things going on with Season 8 and stuff and all the info on Fire and Blood, but we were puzzled by his comments at the time. And I guess we sort of fell into thinking that's just Martin yanking our chain, or he's indulging in fan speculation, though some people he must have read somewhere someone thinking that. I can't believe I dismissed it that much, because it didn't come up in Fire and Blood itself. I thought, well, I guess he was just, yanking our chain. In retrospect, I think that was Martin accidentally leaking out something real. The question is, when did he first come up with that idea? Early work on House of the Dragon was starting up in late 2018. That's around the time Ryan Condal was hired onto the project. So this might have been an idea in its infancy back then. Though there's also the possibility that this is something Martin has been planning for many years, and he was just waiting to reveal it in The Winds of Winter or something. That this has always been a prophecy he had, like the idea that the three-eyed crow is really Bloodraven. He said, that revelation comes out in Book 5. He said, I thought of that in Book 2. He said it wasn't in Book 1, but when I was writing Book 2, I thought of that the three-eyed crow is a Targaryen, has some connection to them. He thinks up things pretty well in advance. So it's possible it was, and even that, just because it's a relatively recent idea doesn't mean it's a bad one. Might be something he came up with as he was working on House of the Dragon, just to expand on it. might be something he thought of 20 years ago and just hasn't told us yet. That actually the secret reason the Targaryen conquest happened was they had a prophecy about the return of the White Walkers. So I can see that happening, but just look at this clip again in context of these rumors that are coming out. Martin himself has said this verbatim. You know, maybe Aegon the Conqueror got tipped off the White Walkers would be coming back. So this is amazing. A few other points that might come up with all of this. How was this Great Commission secretly passed down in the 100 years between the conquest and the dance? And the question of partitioning Westeros. First off, the idea is like Aegon the Conqueror told his eldest son. He told Aenys, but he didn't tell Maegor. I'm guessing this. I don't have this personally. Just passed down from father to son. For guesswork, I want to go, well, how would that work? I would assume he told Aenys, but not Maegor. Then there is some question of, well, Aenys' eldest son, Aegon the Uncrowned, died in a rebellion against Maegor, and eventually his youngest son, Jaehaerys, came to the throne. I think that when Aegon the Uncrowned declared himself a rebel king, before he went off to battle, he must have told his sister wife, Rhaena, and that Rhaena would have then told Jaehaerys when he came to the throne. But he would have told someone before going off into a battle in which he might die. I'm okay with that. There's plausible ways that the information came down to Jaehaerys. Ideally, it's from father to son, king to crown prince. So then in the reign of Jaehaerys, the idea is that he would have told the crown prince Aemon, but because Aemon wasn't king yet, he didn't get to tell Rhaenys, so Rhaenys doesn't know this. Aemon died fighting pirates, so then second son Balon was named the heir, at which point Jaehaerys would have told him, but because Balon never sat the Iron Throne, he died of a burst appendix, he never had a chance to tell Viserys. How did it get passed down? Simply Jaehaerys was still alive. He lived another 2 years after the Great Council at Harrenhal named Viserys the heir. I mean, he was mostly bedridden, but he could still have like one lucid conversation in that 2-year period where he told Viserys, look, there's this secret prophecy, it's supposed to be passed down from father to son. In this case, it's grandfather to grandson, but Jaehaerys must have personally told Viserys. Viserys had put off naming an official heir for a couple of years because he was a young man, it was just the start of his reign. The Velaryons were still stirring up some concerns. He was worried about Daemon. He thought he'd eventually produce a son, so he didn't need to declare an heir just yet. But now that his wife has died, he might not, will he remarry? Will he produce more sons? He doesn't know what's going to happen right now. He's decided, okay, what happens in publicly in the books, that, all right, I'll need to name Rhaenyra the heir so no one makes a play for the throne, that I have an heir in place and Daemon is not suitable as an heir. So he chose Rhaenyra, and now that you are the crown princess, the princess of Dragonstone, I now need to pass down the story to you that we only tell from father to son or monarch to current heir. That this is a secret even within House Targaryen, not all of them know it, that no one ever told Daemon about this. The whole thing that he doesn't believe in the gods, he doesn't believe in prophecy. Well, his father never sat him down and said there's officially a prophecy that Aegon the Conqueror had that we firmly believe in. That makes sense that he wouldn't know of the prophecy because he's this guy publicly scoffing that the gods and prophecies aren't real. So Maegor wouldn't have been told because he was the second son. Similarly, Daemon does not know about this prophecy because he was never officially the heir. He was never Prince of Dragonstone. Now Rhaenyra is Princess of Dragonstone, and the story was passed down to her. But that makes sense enough to me. There's ways it could have come down in the past 100 years. The last point about this is, as some of you will point out, never partition Westeros through civil war, but what about Dorne? Well, even Aegon the Conqueror always considered Dorne on the to-do list. I don't really see a contradiction there, that he wanted to conquer Dorne, and they fought tooth and nail through insurgency and through guerrilla warfare, that conquering it was one thing, holding it was another. But they never quite gave up on taking Dorne in the future, even in Aegon's time. He was still, his formal title was Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. Seven Kingdoms is a geographic term which includes Dorne as the seventh one. His title was King of the Andals and the Rhoynar and the First Men. The Rhoynar are the ethnic group in Dorne. This came up recently, actually, when we were looking at the second teaser, when we noticed, wait, the ceremonial necklace that Rhaenyra has sigils of all the great houses, including the Martells, even though they don't rule them at this point in history. That wasn't a mistake. That was fun. That's like when the King of England would say, I am King of England, Ireland, and France, when they didn't control all of those other ones. That it was a claimed title. And it was a title Aegon passed down to his children. He passed down to his son Aenys, you are Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, King of the Andals and the Rhoynar. They never quite gave up on that. It's just that, I'm guessing here, it seems that Aegon the Conqueror realized that wouldn't happen within his lifetime, but was a long-term goal. That it's weird how, after the First Dornish War, he was really focused on maintaining peace with Dorne, that he would go to peace feasts with them on the anniversary of the end of the war. He'd go to Sunspear with his son. And part of this is he was a very pragmatic guy, that if you're not at war with someone, you're at peace with them, go all in on it. You be serious about the peace you've made. But I think that on the to-do list for the Targaryens was get Dorne in the fold eventually. Maybe not even through conquest, maybe through marriage alliance. Eventually, Dorne did come into the realm through marriage alliance, but, like 80 years after House of the Dragon Season 1, that Daeron II married the sister of the Prince of Dorne, and they came into the realm. But even in this time period, if you read the Rogue Prince novella, when they're trying to figure out who should we have Rhaenyra marry, eventually they decide Laenor Velaryon. They do discuss that Viserys was toying with the idea of, he was entertaining the idea of, hey, maybe we could marry Rhaenyra to a Martell to get Dorne to join our realm. Like, the idea of a marriage alliance with Dorne was 100 years old by the time they actually did it. But it also ties in with the book thing. Viserys wants to peacefully unite Westeros, that he doesn't want to keep fighting the Dornish just for the sake of fighting them. So I don't really see a contradiction there, that we already knew from the books that Targaryens really want Dorne, even if there was a prophecy that Aegon the Conqueror secretly had that we have to unite all the kingdoms. He's wasting so many men through attrition in the Dornish insurgency. If I were in his position, it makes sense. Going to have to pause that, focus on building up the other 6 kingdoms into a united realm, which was still a big task. And look, a generation or 2 from now will get them through marriage alliance, which is actually what they eventually did just 200 years later. So I do not see a contradiction in that. But the bigger thing guiding them is, well, Dorne is something we haven't gotten to yet. Like, the guiding principle for someone like Aenys or Jaehaerys was, don't let the realm we already have get split up in civil war. And this specifically becomes a problem, their first big civil war within House Targaryen, where Alicent does suggest to Rhaenyra, why not just partition the realm? We get the Greens get the south, the Blacks get the north, and Rhaenyra refuses. Even though it's very pragmatic and logical, maybe we should accept that offer. We're running out of money, we're running out of soldiers. Rhaenyra's offensives completely stop after she takes King's Landing. She really can't push into the core territories of the Greens. Even though they thought that they're running out of people, the High Towers are still at full strength, so are the Baratheons. So I can see how this would play out throughout the entire show, and it fits so well with what was happening in the books that I keep wondering if this was an idea that came from Martin himself that he came up with 20 years ago. Particularly because Martin himself was making bizarre comments about this in late 2018, which we didn't understand and eventually just waved off as him just, bloviating or whatever, just, reciting fanfic things. Maybe this was something big that we just chose to overlook because we didn't understand it at the time. I said that there are 3 major prophecies in House of the Dragon Season 1, according to the rumors. First is they'll actually explain who Daenerys the Dreamer was with the Doom of Valyria. Second is that Aegon the Conqueror was secretly motivated by a dream about the return of the White Walkers. This is the third and final one. That Viserys himself is motivated by a prophetic dream that he personally had. And I don't think we'll see this visually. It apparently happened a couple of years ago, but he tells people about it. Viserys had a prophetic dream in which he saw his son wearing the crown of Aegon the Conqueror. This retroactively adds more layers of you realize why he was so confused when his first wife died in childbirth to a son who didn't live a day. And he's so confused, but then he's looking at the artwork of Daenerys the Dreamer and remembering the prophecy from Aegon the Conqueror, which was passed down by every king down to him. He'll basically conclude, prophecies are real. I must have just misinterpreted my dream. Maybe that was something that could happen. Maybe that was like a grandson or something. Okay, but all the other factors in place that if he doesn't name an heir now, there's going to be a civil war. The Velaryons will try something. Daemon is an unfit heir. That, okay, I'll name Rhaenyra the heir. And because the even worse thing is letting Westeros be busted up in civil war. He was told never let that happen. But as the years pass, he then quickly remarries to Alicent Hightower and starts producing sons. But that's even from the print books, the contradiction of he named Rhaenyra the heir, then quickly remarried, because it's pointed out, you're a relatively young man, you can still remarry and produce other children. Maybe you don't need to name an heir right now, but he was worried about someone trying to usurp him, so all of that. But the idea is, around the time that Aegon II is like 7, 10, of that age, where it's clear he's healthy, he's going to live, Viserys is increasingly plagued by doubt that he made the wrong decision, that he misinterpreted the prophecy that he had, the prophetic vision. And I love that old medieval trope of the good, wise, moral king, the old wise king desperately trying to interpret a prophecy he doesn't fully understand, looking to the stars, wondering, God, tell me what this prophecy means. I don't understand it. And trying to parse that out. So I wouldn't say he's a superstitious man, because this is a world where magic objectively exists, and other prophecies were real. He's just trying to understand this one. Of course, we know that prophecies are a two-edged sword, and what he really saw was, just because he saw his son wearing a crown doesn't mean he was the king of all of Westeros. It means there's a civil war, because he's a goddamned usurper. That what actually happens is it turns out to be technically true from a certain point of view, that Aegon gets crowned using the crown of Aegon the Conqueror for his half of Westeros, but Rhaenyra, for her half of Westeros, knights smuggle out her father's crown, that she wears the crown of Viserys. So, yes, Aegon II does end up wearing the crown of Aegon the Conqueror, but Viserys misinterprets the vision and doesn't understand it was during a civil war. So, with the wink and a grin, if we know what's going on here, well, of course he saw him wearing the crown of Aegon the Conqueror. But around the time that Aegon II is 7 to 10-ish, when it's clear he's going to live, he's going to grow up, he increasingly wonders, but that vision seems so real, that prophetic dream seemed so real, maybe I was wrong. But it would be incredibly controversial for him to reverse his decision. It was already really controversial and hypocritical to name Rhaenyra the heir when it was against the principle of male preference inheritance that put Viserys on the throne in the first place. Angered a lot of people, but he made everyone swear binding oaths, Rhaenyra is the heir. Even people who opposed him being on the throne grudgingly said, okay, like you saw in the trailer, like the Baratheons and Velaryons swearing, okay, we'll accept that Rhaenyra is the heir, even though this is hypocritical of you because you didn't become king this way. it would be arguably even more controversial to reverse his decision yet again and go, oh, okay, let's go back to the male preference to put me on in the first place, even after I made all of you swear oaths to the contrary. So he's torn between, maybe the vision was right, but it would be such a controversial decision that I have to be certain about it if I do it. You understand? He's looking for certainty before he does it. So he's looking for signs and portents. He's looking for an omen. Looking at the stars going, give me a sign that maybe I should make Aegon the heir. This is actually 2 parts, but it's for one prophecy, so I count this all as point 3, but it's actually a second thing that happens, which is kind of magical in the sense that it's an omen. It's considered an omen. Amidst all of Viserys' confusion and looking for answers, news reaches King's Landing that a rare white stag has been sighted in the Kingswood. And it is considered a great magical religious omen for someone to hunt and kill a white stag. So it's widely believed they're this great omen. So Viserys announces, we're going to have this giant royal hunting expedition to the Kingswood. And not just like 1 or 2 people, I mean hundreds of people, the entire royal court, plus various other noble houses joining them. And part of it's just, the cover thing is, wouldn't it be fun to have a grand royal hunt? We're going to be hunting stags, boars, hawking, rabbits, all sorts of stuff. But secretly, the driving thing behind this he really hopes for is for young Aegon to go out and hunt the white stag and kill it, will be the omen he was looking for, that Aegon is the rightful heir worthy to sit the Iron Throne. Now we know how the story goes, so of course Aegon fails to kill the white stag, and Viserys decides, okay, I guess that was a sign I should stick with what I'm already doing, that Rhaenyra is the heir. Now, this is amazing to me. I'm really impressed with it, if it turns out to be true at all. Because, if you're unaware of this, and Google this, there's all sorts of background of this I don't really know very well, but in real life, a white stag is seen as a great omen in many cultures, across many different mythologies, that stretching back into the mists of time. I mean, I got my degree in medieval history, so I know of the trope of the white stag from Arthurian legends, which were rewritten in medieval France into, medieval romance format, Chrétien de Troyes and all that. But you understand, the Arthurian myths were rewritten across multiple different cultures and Christianized, and turned into medieval jousting knights in plate armor centuries before they actually had those. That I read the 1100s versions of these, but they were stories that trickled down from the original Celtic Arthurian legends. And sometimes when you read the medieval versions of the Arthurian myths, there's all these footnotes going, this is some sort of pagan survival, or that short guy in this one story, he was probably an elf king in the original version, and they changed it to take out the pagan elements. I know of it secondhand through reading the medieval Arthurian stuff, but then you've got the original Arthurian stuff written in the 600s, and beyond that, beyond the specific, it's not just an Arthur thing, by the way. It's not just Arthur, but the wider realm of Celtic myth in general. Long before the Christian era, long before, Arthur leading the Welsh against the Anglo-Saxons. I mean, literally the mists of time back into the Druid ages and stuff. I do not know Celtic mythology very well. I know the bits of it that got filtered down into medieval romances. So I am aware of the trope of the white stag. I don't know the full history of this. I know that, I just Googling this, and check it out yourself, that the white stag is often associated with the Celtic god Cernunnos, or some people think it's a manifestation of that even broader horned god trope, green man and horned god. Maybe it's something to do with the horned god thing, or the Celtic Cernunnos guy. Very loaded ancient symbol with many different meanings. The hunt for the white stag. when I say a white stag, it's not an albino. Like, albinos have red eyes. It's a white melanism thing. White stags actually happen in real life. This isn't like a fantasy animal. It's rare. But it became a trope in oral mythologies, in the going back to the Indo-Europeans, the earliest legends of it's a good omen if the trope of the king doesn't know which son to name the heir to the tribe, so he sends them out to hunt a white stag, and whoever hunts it is proven as an omen that he's the rightful heir. Very widespread trope with a lot of history behind it, and I'm not an expert. I don't know the full thing. I would be really excited if this rumor turns out to be true, because you could sustain a full chapter in an analysis book about the myth of the white stag and how House of the Dragon would be referring to this really loaded real-life mythology for that. So people who are bigger into mythos stuff than I am would have a field day with this, that when we're making fan analysis books for House of the Dragon, the hunting of the white stag will be an entire chapter, if this turns out to be true. It is a very loaded, deep-seated mythology thing, and I'd be really happy if they did it, because it's a big medieval thing. Now, I cut all of this out for time, but there is ample evidence that a royal hunt is going to be happening in Season 1, in specifically Episode 3. This took a long time to explain, so I split it off into its own 45-minute video right before this one. But we have very clear spy photos of a giant royal hunting camp that they built in Aldershot. At the time, we thought maybe it's a tournament. No, there isn't a jousting set there. It is a hunting camp with tents and pavilions. And the way the director's schedule worked out, we know what's happening in the other 9 episodes, but Episode 3 is now a blank space where there wouldn't be any book storylines, gives them room for an invented storyline, such as this big royal hunt that I already showed my work that we know there's a big royal hunt happening in Episode 3. Haven't proven that a white stag is in it yet, but something is happening and this is lining up. On top of that, comments by George R. R. Martin himself complaining, "Oh man, I really wanted a big royal hunt with hundreds of people in Game of Thrones Season 1. But I made a whole other 45-minute video on this. I hope you've seen it already. If you haven't, please check it out. That we know there's a giant royal hunt in Episode 3. The new thing added to that is, the secret reason behind it is Viserys wants Aegon to hunt the white stag to prove his prophetic dream that he saw his son wearing the crown, and that he's a worthy heir. But he'll fail. And you get the impression that from this day forward, when he was like 10 or 12, Viserys basically ignored Aegon II to focus all of his attention on Rhaenyra as the unquestioned, official royal heir. I need to devote all of my time to preparing her to rule after me. And the books say that he would take her to small council meetings regularly to train her in governance. But the problem is Viserys was so focused on the mission of preserve the realm through my designated heir and having her rule after him, that he lost sight of taking time to raise his younger children. So don't be surprised when Aegon or Aemon turn out to be kind of jerks. The ripple effect of that, and I love Martin's writing with that this isn't like Lord of the Rings didn't have screwed up character dynamics like this, whereas it's a lot of Westeros is petty family rivalries, internal rivalries. We're not even talking about like the Lannister stuff. I mean like Robert compared to Stannis, whereas Robert's the kind of carefree older one that everyone loves, whereas Stannis is the serious second brother who gets ignored by everyone. And just the bitterness in there, and the internal rivalries. And the whole thing of the conflict in the human heart is what he wanted to focus on more. And big influence was Faulkner, that Martin said he wanted, that he did for fantasy what Faulkner with Southern Gothic did for mainstream stuff, showing these screwed up families full of flawed characters with internal rivalries bouncing off each other. And that's amazing. And Yeah, I'm famously a rabid Rhaenyra supporter, but I want to have well-written characters that Aegon isn't Joffrey 2.0. I'm going to be annoyed if people jump to that because their key difference is he's actually more dangerous because he's not as crazy and because he's not entirely a bad person. He's very flawed, more flawed than Rhaenyra. But like he's capable of love. He genuinely loves his brothers. He loves his dragon. He's hot-headed and he's young, but he's not a coward like Joffrey was. He'll lead his armies from the front. There are nice things you can say about him. He's very short-sighted. He's young and all of that stuff. But I don't want him to be a cartoon character. Like Joffrey's the exception because he was a born psychopath. Let's not forget Stannis' story from the books with the kitchen cat. That as soon as Joffrey was old enough to walk and talk, he was butchering small animals. He was a born psychopath. And that's the exception because Martin's really focused more on like how people react to Joffrey. That when Joffrey's like openly killing people from the battlements with a crossbow or killing things in open court, and good people, knights sworn to protect people, do nothing in the face of his evil. It's not so much Joffrey as how other people react to his tyranny, and some people fail to rise. The moral question of that they're not doing that. But this is a character study here that we know that by the time Viserys dies, they say we find Aegon drunk in a brothel with a whore and betting on rat fights. And he grows up to be this gluttonous lecher he's sulky and moody. And logically, how would someone grow up to be like that? Well, if your father ignores you and your mother spoils you rotten, that I think that makes him more compelling. That when we're going to start out this show seeing his parents before he's born, we're going to see him as a 4-year-old. And then you'll see like this big hunting trip where in their medieval culture, a boy hunting his first stag, his first deer hunt, and successfully hunting his first deer like he does, that is a major step on the road to manhood. This is a life milestone. And he succeeded in killing a regular stag on his first hunt. And his father ignores him because, well, it wasn't this ultra-rare, semi-legendary white stag. So from this day forward, we're going to ignore you and cast him aside. That is objectively unfair. And it's so weird that we focus so much on Rhaenyra breaking the glass ceiling, and some people worried from the trailer, oh, they burn the realm before they let a woman do this. So much of this is really cynical politics of people side with Rhaenyra or against her based on what political favors they can have, not, oh, it has to be a woman. You get a sense of I'm extrapolating this, you get a sense of the Greens' point of view in this, that Rhaenyra, from their point of view, was unjustly Viserys playing favorites. That it was Aegon II who had to work twice as hard to get noticed. That why am I being held up to a higher that I have to set a higher bar to be considered the equal of my sister, of the female heir. That people think she's brave just for being a girl, whereas I'm doing normal, milestones for a young man, and just you're ignoring me after my hunt. So you can see why he grew up to be like that. He got ignored. And that Viserys, he's trying to be good, but he can't give equal attention to everyone. And that would be great if they really show this as a character arc and showing Aegon as a multi-dimensional person, that there's reasons he grew up to be the way he was. And that he was being held up to an unfair standard of, but you didn't kill the special white stag. That I can really see this rounding him out as a person very well. The Greens think that there was unjust favoritism to Rhaenyra, when by rights, yeah, according to some arguments, Aegon should have been heir. If you count from Viserys, if you count from Jaehaerys, it should actually be like Laena's children should be the heir, but neither here nor there. But working out something this well-written character-wise is in some ways more important for me than all the magic stuff. But that's me. I'm not into the magic stuff that much. I'm into the politics. But I know a lot of you out there are. And it's more the principle of thing, tying all this together. When Benioff and Weiss are being flippant about, we took the magic stuff out. We want moms and football players to watch it. That was really offensive, even though I wasn't even a particular fan of the esoteric, magic and prophecy stuff. The fact that it's part of the work you're allegedly adapting and you just plain don't care, and it's not like it didn't even sound like a measured decision. The way they said it was also awful, very flippant. So I'm really excited. If the reason I'm sharing these rumors is there are channels out there who said we're not going to come back for House of the Dragon. We got burned too badly by people who didn't understand the books and were just giving us stripped down tits and dragons, mindless action scenes and spectacle. These writers, if these rumors are true, are adding back in as much magic as possible in such a way that it doesn't really mess anything up, because, well, it's magic in the form of people have prophetic dreams. Okay, that fits perfectly, because, well, it's a dream, it's a prophecy, it's not like zombies running around. And the Targaryens were long established to have prophetic dreams. What I'm excited about, more you understand, is that how this would fuel the character dynamics. That I personally am not so much excited about Viserys having prophetic dreams as the character study of how in his character, how he reacts to having prophetic dreams, how his doubts about it and second guessing himself are more interesting to me. The conflict in the human heart and all of that's what I have come for, and how failing to kill the White Stag would be a big character development thing that Aegon II was ignored after this unfairly. But for many of you out there, and I hope my specific, major content creators and YouTube channels who've given up on the show, it is a big gesture that they're trying to put back in as many story elements of this fantasy universe as possible. That the original show took out, has intentionally, self-consciously tried to take out as much magic as possible. This is a prequel era with comparatively little magic, and they're trying to put back in as much as possible. This is just season 1. I mean, imagine when we actually get to Alice Rivers, the Witch of Harrenhal, by like season 2 or 3. That'll give them an excuse to do a lot of magic stuff. But that's when we get to it. I think this is a beautifully elegant way to fit magic stuff in through prophetic dreams and the character growth and just the gesture of putting all this in, and how I really hope this brings people back. If this is true, and it'll be a sign of how seriously they're taking it and Martin's vision. And a lot of this stuff might have actually originated from Martin himself, given all of his comments about it. Well, please tell me what you think in the comments on this. I look forward to all of your answers. I'm going to try to reply to all of them. Do you think this is true? I'm pretty sure it's true. The rumors, because it's lining up with spy photos and other things, and things Martin said. And tell me in your own words the contrast between that this show is trying to put back in as much magic as possible, in a way that actually fits very well, I think. Your feelings on that.